Hi, my name is Majed J. Taifour, founder of the Transcendental Reengineering Movement. What I'm going to be talking to you about today may come as a surprise. This is what is happening. During COVID-19 times, a new phenomena has risen. It has become a new reality. Now here's what's happening. Women today are being increasingly harassed sexually at work, but in a different way. It is now for that reason, they have to endure it and they have to suffer because of it. And the dilemma is they cannot protest. The governments are helpless and employers are useless and women are powerless.
One of the very, very well-known and established red flags is what I call dude overload. That's where there are an exponential number of men in the workplace compared to women. Unfortunately, the research has confirmed, completely doubled down, confirmed the fact that when there aren't a sufficient number of women in that environment, then men pretty much act like barbaric heathens and they engage in sexual harassment, a lot of harassment and nonsense.
A friend of mine shared with me her story. I found the story astounding. What she told me was that a colleague of hers at work, although she never met him personally, sent her after a 2-hour work session on Zoom a photo of himself Today, I am going to be talking to you about a new pandemic, a different type of pandemic, much different from COVID-19, perhaps much more serious and maybe more dangerous, especially now, a time when we are moving into a digital world where most work is done from home, remotely, via the online. This pandemic has offered some men at work newer ways to pester women sexually, but this time virtually, using online tools. As a result, sexual harassment has moved to a new level, a new dimension, and a new lower standard. In today's world, which is plagued by COVID-19 with no end in sight, there is no longer a need for sexual harassment to happen in a physical workplace or in a work environment. it has actually gone viral and digital. In fact, its momentum is increasing so rapidly that it has become almost impossible for anyone to control.
Williams is the Crisis Services Director for Sexual Assault Response and Awareness in Roanoke. She says calls to the organization's crisis hotline have increased since people are staying at home more.
Mostly what we're seeing, I think, are people who are not necessarily in unsafe situations in this very moment, but that are survivors of sexual assault who are finding this isolation difficult.
While the pandemic persists, and as long as social distancing is forcing rapid changes to happen in working environments, workplace sexual harassment persists too. This is happening at a time when the physical workplace is mutating into an environment which is both digital and increasingly out of the office. According to one statistic, downloads of one popular video conferencing app increased from nearly 56,000 to over 2.1 million per day. And this happened only 3 months ago. The widespread use of these remote working technologies has brought with it its own problems and its own complexities. And this is why, amid the quarantines, workplace sexual harassment around the globe has gone viral like a bushfire.
Christine Blasey Ford, who spoke out about alleged sexual assault by the Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, has talked about how she's had to move home 4 times and hire a private security firm to protect her family due to threats and harassment online.
Gone are the days when women before COVID-19 were sexually assaulted in New York subways or the London public transport, because nowadays the fear of sexual assault has moved from office workspaces and transit environments over to the web. Zoom meetings, direct messaging, and email exchanges have become more flirtatious.
Online misogyny is a global gender rights tragedy, and it is imperative that it ends. It's clearly traumatizing. Our mental health, our emotional well-being are so gravely affected because the threat of violence is experienced neurobiologically as violence. The cortisol shoots up, the limbic system gets fired, we lose productivity at work. And let's talk about work. Our ability to work is constrained. Online searches of women applying for jobs reveal nude pictures of them, false allegations they have STDs, their addresses indicating that they are available for sex. Law enforcement must be empowered with up-to-date internet technology, the devices, and an understanding of these platforms, how they work. The police wanted to be helpful when Amanda Hess called about the death threat she was getting on Twitter, but they couldn't really when they said, "What's Twitter?" In New York recently, the law could not be applied to a perpetrator because the crimes must have been committed, even if it was anonymous. They must have been committed by telephone, in mail, by telegraph.
There is a new trend in technology today that is referred to as Zoom bombing.
In this moment that we've been in, what we've done is transport crucial life opportunities online in ways that, always our entire experience is mediated by network tools, right? But what COVID has taught us is we've shifted our schools, we've shifted our learning, we've shifted our work online. in arguing for cyber civil rights for as long as I had, so often the response was, Danielle, get over yourself. It's no big deal. It's trivial. And the bottom line is now I think we recognize that while we're working online, while we're getting educated online, while we're seeing theater online, right, where we're doing so much of our work and lives online, we're seeing disruptions to those opportunities, right? Whether it's Zoom bombing, right, trolls invading your classroom, which public lectures, workplaces or virtual conversations are being invaded by cyber mobs. So what we're seeing is our dependence on these online platforms for our life opportunities brings to the fore how important they've always been.
Zoom bombing refers to the use of multi-user conference calls to display inappropriate and offensive materials, to deliver social slur, or engage in other disturbing behavior. It usually happens at conferences that anyone could join. Now, I'm not saying that it may or may not affect private work meetings. However, something very much similar is eventually happening in work-related calls. And that new trend is becoming more and more awkward.
Our colleague Jesslyn was recently the target of online mob harassment.
Maybe it's true. You don't want people talking about makeup behind
So we paid a visit to Carrie Goldberg, a victims' rights attorney in Brooklyn.
We represent targets of harassment, blackmail, and sexual assault.
In other words,
we basically make life miserable for perverts, psychos, trolls, and assholes.
According to Carrie, here's what you should do if you're ever the target of online mob harassment.
Rule number 1 is never feed the trolls. You don't respond to them, you don't make yourself accessible to them.
Rule number 2,
don't panic.
Rule number 3,
Rule number 3, screenshot everything.
because
Some of the people might start to escalate, and you want to have a record of all of that.
Rule number 4,
Get tech involved. Get the online platform where it's happening involved. Report everybody and everything.
and finally,
I had rule number 5.
Before COVID times, women at work were able to file a complaint about sexual harassment.
I wanted justice, but I wasn't in it for some personal vendetta. I don't want this to happen to other women, and I don't want him to do it in the future.
2 months later, the Forest Service sent her a letter.
It said an investigation against allegations of misconduct was conducted, and we found that there was no misconduct. And so then it just feels like you're screaming into a void, this happened, and nobody hears that. Or believes it, or they hear it and don't believe it at all.
But now they are working online from home. So they are left with no other option but to tremble in fear and suffer from panic attacks, not knowing what to do next whenever they are sexually harassed online.
I want to talk to you about sexual harassment in the virtual workplace. As we all know, sexual harassment in the workplace is illegal. So any kind of harassment that is either severe, which is really bad, or pervasive, it happens over and over and over, it can be something that you can sue for, it can be illegal. Well, now a lot of us, because of the epidemic, are at home and we are working on Zoom and other platforms. We're not going into the office. The important thing for you to know is that the sexual harassment laws still apply. So it's possible for you to be sexually harassed on Zoom. It's possible for you to be sexually harassed through direct message. It's possible for you to be sexually harassed through text message, all related to work. So it's an interesting phenomenon, whereas it used to be, somebody, it was often a male, walks down the hall, walks into somebody's office, perhaps leers at them or leans over them. Well, that can't happen if you're not in the office, but it can still happen on Zoom if someone is making inappropriate comments. Somebody is sharing their screen with you that say it has inappropriate material and they're doing this repeatedly. Or they're sending you messages. either through, whatever channel you can think of, Facebook, text message, anything that's work-related, can still constitute illegal sexual harassment, even though it's online.
Now, this is becoming very strange. Instead of sexual harassment at work diminishing because of the coronavirus, it has become more predominant, more powerful than ever, with fewer options for remedy.
How many of you have been sexually harassed over the course of your career? Leave your hand up if it's more than twice, more than 3 times, more than 4 times. How many of you have been referred to, show of hands, as a girl, a doll, a babe, or honey at work?
Sweetheart belongs on that list as well.
How many of you have heard you're too emotional? How many of you filed an HR request against your harasser?
The way I see it, this could mean only one thing. Sexism is adaptable, and sexual predators are too.
I think we're all living in a new reality. I don't think the issues of misogyny, harassment, and assault in government and politics are going to go anywhere anytime soon. We also know that times of public distress also increase the prevalence of incidences of violence. And that's where we saw it after Superstorm Sandy. The feds recognized that there was a huge influx of federal funds to support domestic and sexual violence programs after that point in time.
I remember reading recently the story of a woman in the UK who was terrified by a stalker at work because he used her mobile number to locate her home address and show up at her door to invade her privacy and to ask for sex. So, instead of women at work being able to break the pattern of sexual harassment, they have become more subjected to it. I also read about a woman in France whose boss asked her to wear revealing clothing while joining Zoom work calls. And what makes it easier for this to happen behind closed doors is that there are no witnesses online. Let's take the example of Australia, where I live. It has been reported that working from home has made it more challenging for women to declare sexual harassment. And although physical abuse of women at work may have decreased post-COVID, surprisingly, emotional distress has been on the rise.
The reality in Australia is that 1 in 3 women experience sexual harassment at some point in their life, with the majority of that sexual harassment occurring in the workplace. As a recent graduate from law school, I'm terrified of the fact that at some point in my career, I'm probably going to be sexually harassed.
I'm so scared to look at a woman. I'm so scared to compliment a woman. I'm so scared to even hug a woman, because I better have a big enough bank account for her to turn around and file a complaint or file a lawsuit against me.
Let me tell you about Victoria. As you all know, like Florida in the US, Victoria is the epicenter of the virus in Australia. That state is said to have witnessed the highest growth in sexual harassment, with cases rising by 8% now compared to 2019. Recent reports have counted 39 sexual harassment complaints by women working from home. In one case, a woman was messaged approximately 300 times in a day and consistently at night by a work colleague, again looking for sex. Before the pandemic, statistics revealed that 1 in 3 Australians, 2 in 5 of them are women, while 1 in 4 are men have experienced sexual harassment in the workplace. That was between 2014 and 2019. There are no statistics available yet for 2020, so we don't know if it is actually on the rise or on the decrease. It remains to be seen. A tragic and terrible transformation is happening already. In a recent study of harassment in Sweden, women who have been promoted into leadership positions faced even more harassment than those who have not. The world is certainly changing, and not for the better. Things just seem to be taking the wrong turn. Many are at risk of falling off the radar altogether. Now, if history taught us anything, it is that economic vulnerability can breed harassment. In the US, workplace harassment charges surged during the 2008 Great Recession to a 2-decade record. In fact, harassment cases during that year alone increased to 33 per 1,000 employees, a rise that was 4 times higher than the rate of increase in the decades before. This could mean only one thing: harassment spikes with insecurity. I have been approached many times by several women victims for counseling and advice. What I discovered was that it was more of a technology problem than anything else. This has prompted immediate action on behalf of their employers. Today's remote workspaces have threatened the ability of women to speak. It has even prevented them from responding to sexual harassment. In fact, we are living today in a Wild West type of working environment, and that happened post-COVID-19. Employers are scrambling to offer effective resources to female employees to report sexual harassment. Now, these include, among others, anonymous, confidential, and social media-based reporting applications like Callisto, Stop It, and Talk to Spot. And as COVID-19 is altering the landscape of sexual harassment, employers are even thinking of enlisting soon Slack bots, also known as Slack chatbots. These bots can be designed to undertake a huge variety of tasks, from acting as email management tools to boosting company morale and flagging toxic behavior in virtual work environments. They can trigger employee conversations about abusive language in the remote workspace. There are other technological tools that can be used to curb sexual harassment within the digital workspace. Among them, virtual reality holds the greatest potential to change how the world perceives and understands sexual harassment. VR is often celebrated for its unique capacity to foster empathy by immersing users in alternate realities. Data from Gartner, a global research firm, tells us that by 2030, the demand for remote work will increase by 30%. That's when Generation Z, which is the demographic group succeeding millennials and preceding Generation Alpha, enters the workplace. Before that happens, employers should be aware of this extension and must take all necessary steps to ensure that the parallel virtual workplace remains as safe and as free of intended or unintended sexual harassment. Until that happens, women in remote workspaces should not allow anyone to take away their worth, their privacy, their energy, their time, their safety, their intimacy, their confidence, and their voice. Thank you for watching. This is Majed J. Taifor, life coach, public and motivational speaker, saying goodbye to you all. In my next video, I will be sharing with you one of the most mysterious and enigmatic occurrence that is taking place amid COVID-19, suicide.